it's interesting. It is occasionally challenged. We use 100 as a kind of matter of course, but people do challenge it on both sides. I've had people say, "Oh, I'm never going to live that long. There's no point building a financial plan. I don't care if it runs out at 90." And we have to be the ones pointing out to them what actual life expectancy numbers look like. And the fact that means is, if average life expectancy is say 87, it means that 50% of people are living beyond that. And that might be you, it might not, but let's err on the side of caution. If you're happy, if your plan runs out at 90 and you're telling me that you're deliriously happy, that doesn't matter, you're planning to spend all of your money, that's great. But we need to be able to adjust that as we move along. But I think increasingly, I'm seeing clients who perhaps were 50 or 60 when we met them. My business is nearly 30 years old now, so suddenly they're pushing into their 80s and 90s. Some of them are in pretty good shape. So we've started to push the life expectancy rate beyond 100. But the starting point is 100. There's no real science behind that. I'll come back to that reasonable. Based on average life expectancy, it's probably cautious. 1 in 4 people age 60 will probably get to 100. So we're probably being cautious on that basis. But if somebody wants us to change that, that is one assumption. I'm quite happy. I'm less happy to go too young, but I'm quite happy to push it out to 105, something like that, if somebody feels strongly that way. What we've discovered, I mean, I'm a great believer in the fact that expenditure reduces later in life, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. It doesn't necessarily feel right to people when you explain that to them, that are likely to spend less later. And we'll perhaps come on to that as one of the other assumptions, but the evidence is there. And I'm generally of the view that if you've got a significant cash flow surplus by the time you get to your mid-70s, most of the clients that we have got a pretty good idea about how much money they are going to need personally, and they can start to make gifts perhaps to family more confidently once they get into their late 70s, early 80s, gifts that it wouldn't have been appropriate to make in their 60s, when there was a very real possibility they might need that money to drive their Ferrari or go on their fantastic cruises or whatever. But by around about mid-70s, people have generally done most of the stuff they want to do that are going to require big globs of money, and they can start to make some pretty profound decisions about maybe helping their children out.
Yeah, so we go with 100 as the standard life expectancy. I mean, partly it's derived, I guess, to a certain extent as almost being a bit of a default on the system. But I think also when you go into it, we talk to clients about the ONS life expectancy figures. So, you can hop onto the website and, get an idea of their life expectancy, which, unless they're well into their 90s, is going to be well below 100. So, we always say to clients that we always err on the side of caution. We will assume that, investments might grow by slightly less than they probably do. You'll spend slightly more than you probably will, and that you'll live slightly longer than you probably will as well. But, if the system works in those regards, then all the better. So yeah, as I say, 100 is our standard. Again, if the clients want to change that, if their parents have lived to 115 or have only lived to 55, they may have a view as to why they want to change that. And we will have a conversation about that. And obviously, if they want to plan to a certain point, that's totally up to them. No, I was going to say, no, it's a good point, because, my view with this and all areas of financial planning really is that one of my roles is to challenge the individual. They've reached an assumption in their mind based on, we all have our own biases and reasons why we've come to a certain conclusion. But I think, as you said, they may have sort of anchored themselves on a certain date. And so I think it's important from sort of our side of the table to challenge them on that and say, that's absolutely fine, but, bear in mind the generation that your parents or your grandparents grew up in, changes to life expectancy over that period of time. And almost, it depends how much depth they, how much they want to go into, but you can almost go back and say, well, look, when they were sort of reaching that point, what was average life expectancy? Because they may well have hit average life expectancy for their generation. Your generation is different. My generation is different. My children's generation is going to be different as well. So I think it's important to challenge them and make sure that, you know, my views on why I want to go long, if you like, are there, so that they're not just saying, oh yeah, well, you know, we'll spend everything by the time we're 75 and that's it.
Okay, so we start with age 100. So we assume our client's going to live to age 100. However, if we have particularly younger clients, or perhaps children of our clients who come on board, we would have the discussion with them about possibly using a longer life expectancy than 100. Because for our particularly older clients, we have clients that when they approach their 90s, because I don't like them to see a particularly short lifespan on the screen, we might go out to age 110 or something for them, just so they can see a longer period of time. Some people sort of laugh when you say 100 and think, well, you know, who lives to age 100 these days? But life expectancy is based on average life expectancy. Our clients are typically more comfortable than the masses, so they might care for themselves a bit better. So they might not be average in their life expectancy. My dad was 96 the other day, and he's still going. So I think 100's pretty fair and reasonable. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've had those conversations as well. People wanting to retire early because both their parents have passed away, perhaps on both sides of the relationship. And I just sort of explained to them that, you know, it would be a shame if we put all our planning into age 85 and you kind of run out of money. And we're not really, we can weight the spending pattern towards the early years of retirement, and we kind of step that down over time. But I don't recall ever amending the cash flow to below age 100 for anybody. People are quite happy. I think with the advancement of medical services, you know, treatments that you can get, and what's happening with sort of sequencing of genomes and things, perhaps we will live longer. If Google has its way, perhaps we'll be immortal and carry on living forever.
Well, we project them all to age 100. We always have done. We haven't had, I think I maybe have had one client when her husband died and she had to really think about the money that she had. She insisted that she wouldn't live beyond 80 odd, 85. And I think she was in her 70s then. So we modeled it for her at 85. But we also showed it to age 100 as well. And as part of the cash flow modeling and part of the budgeting exercises that clients do every year to update their cash flow, she will easily have money to maintain her lifestyle beyond age 100. But I think she was basing it on, and which a lot of families do, they base it on family history. They say, well, my mum didn't, and her mum before her, or my dad, and they died at age. And I said, well, if you think about it, you probably had a healthier lifestyle than your parents or grandparents. You probably keep fit a little bit more. And then they're all nodding and going, yes, yes, yes. I said, so there isn't any reason why you should die at the same, unless there's some, you know, genetic disease that you may get, you know, heart or cancer, but there isn't any reason why we shouldn't project it to a much longer age. And it's better to do that just so we can see whether you can maintain your lifestyle, and it gives you reassurance. No, but we do actually project it to say 105 if the person is that much older, because the one thing I don't like is going to the final cash flow scene and there's only a few lines.
Yeah.
So I will project it to say 110. So it looks, you know, psychologically, it looks better.
Okay, so this is always a really interesting part of financial planning because it's very important, but we don't know. So this is where there is no qualification for financial planners to know how long a client will live for, sadly. but it is outside our realm of knowledge, so that's okay. We assume that all of our clients live to 100 and die the next day. Will we be right? No. I think whatever you do here, you'll be wrong. Importantly, we don't use average life expectancy, because if you use average life expectancy, half your clients would die too soon, half would live too long, and you're never right. So we like to go beyond average to 100. Some clients will look at the graph and actually turn a blind eye to the last 15 years, maybe, if they've got bad health in their family or anything like that. But for clients who are healthy, we project to 100. Some occasions that can cause a few complications, particularly we've got age gaps. We've got a few clients where they've got a 13, 15, 20-year age gap between the two of them. That obviously has lots of additional thinking around it, particularly thinking about future lifestyle and funding that. If the younger one's going to be around for an extra 15, 20 years, how will that impact their expenditure? So will they be doing holidays and trips through to they're both 80? Probably not, because one of them would be 100. So that would impact those things. Equally, we need to think about the longevity of this plan. So we typically use the younger person's age 100. So potentially the other person gets 120. Very unlikely to happen. Sometimes we have one of them dying first when they get to 100, and then the other one projecting that extra 20-year period. But it's important with age gaps, certainly, to consider that. Personally, I'm not at that stage yet where I'm thinking about retiring, but if I was making those big decisions, I wouldn't want to be relying on the fact that I'll die at 80 and running out if I don't. So having the financial resources to get further is sensible. You may not need it. It may then be going to partners, children, wherever it's being left. But you certainly wouldn't want to, or our clients wouldn't want to rely upon dying at the average life expectancy. That wouldn't feel sensible for most people, certainly.
We default to age 100. Clients occasionally, however, will say, actually, I want to use this date because I'm an actuary once, but also they may have had sadly a diagnosis or something. But I think it's really important for us as financial planners. We sell two types of products. You sell protection to cover the risk of dying too early, and you sell investment for the risk of living for too long. So 100 seems about right. Yes, we have, but then if you also say that, for example, the risk of living too long is that it costs more. And if you've applied inflation to all your long-term assumptions, such as later life care, then it's only going to look worse. It's going to cost more money. So if you've made some more longevity-based assumptions than the client thinks is realistic, then it's going to show a worse outcome. I mean, I can appreciate if they've got less money, they want to look at less big targets to achieve, then that will affect the figures, obviously. But most of our clients want to plan prudently. Yes, we've planned for living to 110 in one case. We had a very elderly client, and she wanted to make sure that her care fees were covered into when she was no longer capable. And we're dealing at the moment with a couple of attorneys who, of course, are looking after their clients who have dementia, the actual original client. So it's important to have those conversations with attorneys and make sure you're making realistic assumptions about the life expectancy for someone in care. A safe assumption that we found in the past has been if you're going to last more than 5 years with round the clock care and you're in a pretty bad state, then that would be about the upper end of it, really. But I've seen people hang on nearly that long.
Always do 100. It's been drilled into me since Mr. Etheridge was around. We do look at the ONS data, but we always use 100. Company mantra is we'd much rather your money outlives you than you outlive your money. And statistically, you'd expect people 50 plus would have. Sounds really horrible, would have probably gone by 100 in that respect. If you live beyond that, fine. If there's long life in the family, we may plan to 100, 110 or something. But realistically speaking, probably 100 is this figure we look at. Unless the client has a really strong view on something, and I would always do that as a what-if scenario as opposed to an actual scenario. All the scenarios do minimum as a constant is 100. We do. We have clients that smoke and drink, and they're adamant not going to live to 100. And we have the conversation. Well, actually, most of the people will deal with the families, or widowers, this type of thing. So they will have next generation and future generations to plan for. So it's all well and good planning for yourself, but a lot of the work we do is intergenerational, multi-generational planning. So we're very careful as to who we take on board as clients, first and foremost. But secondly, of course, we make sure that that's explained to them as well. So it's not just about having that perfect ski slope to 100 for yourselves. Think about who you're leaving behind, perhaps. You might want to leave a legacy. Yeah, exactly. But I think it's also having that conversation with them about, I mean, you can't take it with you. Fortunately, in a lot of cases, people do get to that age, that there is a significant amount of blue on the page. So how do we plan to start giving money away? Philanthropy, giving it to better causes that are true to yourself, and maybe onto family and friends as well, if they want to see the smiles on their faces while you're still alive, rather than when you're no longer here.